My name is Nate, and I'm part of the team at C-SPAN that brings you live coverage of Congress and the day's top political events unfiltered. As a nonprofit organization that receives no government funding, we're asking for your help to support C-SPAN's daily operations. Please visit cspan.org/donate to learn more and consider making a one-time or recurring tax-deductible donation. That's cspan.org/donate.
This week, C-SPAN was on the road in Iowa as 2024 presidential candidates brought along surrogates to help make their cases to caucusgoers, with just 3 weeks to go until the Hawkeye State's first-in-the-nation contest. Hear Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz stumping for former President Donald Trump in Iowa. See Governor Ron DeSantis, with Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie also in the Hawkeye State. We'll also take a look at how local Republicans in Iowa are preparing for next month's caucus, and see independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as he met with voters in Phoenix. Also, conversations with political reporters Stephen Gruber Miller and Paul Steinhauser on the latest campaign news in New Hampshire and Iowa. But first, a look at the response to the Colorado Supreme Court's decision to bar former President Donald Trump from the state's ballot for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. The former president himself released a statement calling the decision, quote, completely flawed. He went on to state, quote, "We have full confidence that the U.S. Supreme Court will quickly rule in our favor and finally put an end to these un-American lawsuits." Next, a look at reaction to the Colorado Supreme Court's decision from fellow Republican contenders Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Nikki Haley.
I think the U.S. Supreme Court is going to reverse that, but here's the larger thing of what the left and the media and the Democrats are doing. They're doing all this stuff to basically solidify support in the primary for him, get him into the general, and the whole general election is going to be all this legal stuff. And look, it's unfair. They're abusing power 100%. But the question is that going to work? And I think they have a playbook that unfortunately will work, and it'll give Biden or the Democrat or whoever the ability to skate through this thing. That's their plan. That's what they want. What they don't want is to have somebody like me who will make the election not about all those other issues, but will make the election about the failures of Biden, the failures of the left, and how we're going to be able to turn the country around. If that's how the election's framed, we will win.
They have just tried to bar President Trump from the Colorado ballot using an unconstitutional maneuver that is a bastardization of the 14th Amendment to our U.S. Constitution. This was a provision, Section 3, that was designed to bar Confederate members, people who switched to the Confederacy, from actually being able to serve. That's very different than what's at issue here, to say the least. This is a hollowed out husk of what the country was built on. The basic principle that we, the people, select our leadership, not the unelected elite class in the back of palace halls. That's old world Europe, not the United States. That's why I'm making a pledge today that I will withdraw. I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary ballot unless and until Trump's name is restored. And I demand that Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie and Nikki Haley do the same thing, or else these Republicans are simply complicit in this unconstitutional attack on the way we conduct our constitutional republic.
I mean, look, what we saw in Colorado, I will tell you that I don't think Donald Trump needs to be president. I think I need to be president. I think that's good for the country. But I will beat him fair and square. We don't need to have judges making these decisions. We need voters to make these decisions. So I want to see this in the hands of the voters. We're going to win this the right way. We're going to do what we need to do. But the last thing we want is judges telling us who can and can't be on the ballot.
President Biden also reacted to the news from Colorado's Supreme Court while arriving for a visit to Milwaukee. Let's listen.
That's up to the court. That's all I have to say.
Is he an insurrectionist? Is Trump an insurrectionist, sir?
Well, I think it's certainly self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. And no question about it. None. Zero. And, he seems to be doubling down on about everything. Anyway, I've got to go do this.
Next, we're in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. That's where Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz of Florida spoke to Republican caucusgoers, telling them why he was supporting the former president's 2024 bid. Let's listen.
We have to have the strength. And with all due respect to all the other Republicans who are running for president right now, there is one man with the experience and the drive and the vision to lead our party and our movement, and that is Donald J. Trump. How did it get this way? How did it get this way where these agencies were turned against us, where our budget was not in any way in line with our thinking about how to appropriate dollars, where our border was exploded? The reason it got this way is because Washington, D.C. is a fundamentally corrupt place. And for far too long, it's been the same special interests in big pharma and big business and big banks and big tech that have bought off the people in both political parties. And so it's mattered less who's in control of what branch or what body or what caucus, because far too many of the people in Washington, D.C. are working for the same special interests. And that is why President Trump is so dangerous to them, because they know he cannot be bought. He cannot be corrupted. He cannot be persuaded. Because in Washington, D.C., first they try to buy you off, then they try to compromise you, and then they try to destroy you. I know. I've been through it. And what I can tell you is, like President Trump, when you come out the other side, you are stronger, and you have the armor of God and the vision and the capability to go forward and dismantle these systems. That is why I'm so enthusiastically for President Trump, because he sees it, he knows it, he gets it. And when you observe all that they're putting him through, it just makes me want to rededicate myself more. When I see the phony charges, when I see the misuse of the criminal justice system, when I see them try to bankrupt and jail this man, it makes me want to book that next trip to Iowa. It makes me want to make sure that I call 10 people to come and caucus. And that's what we have that these other astroturfed movements don't have. We are the ones. We are the people. There's no other group coming to save this nation. We have to unify as patriots, and we have to know the stakes and what is before us. Ginger and I travel all over this country to encourage our America First brothers and sisters, and we do it on the West Coast, the East Coast, all over. And in some places, people wonder how they can have a role. Maybe they don't have a really swing Senate district where they live, or maybe there's not one of the most important congressional contests there, and so they really have to think about how to become digital warriors, or maybe donate financially to a campaign that's in another part of the country. But you are right here where all the action is, at the tip of the spear. And here's what's going to happen on caucus night. We are going to be either a divided movement, a divided party that will stumble off into New Hampshire and South Carolina and Super Tuesday, with Republicans spending tens of millions of dollars fighting each other, while the Democrats just continue to prop whatever version of Joe they have up and trot him out on the stage. Or you can deliver such a resounding victory in the Iowa caucuses that we acknowledge that this is a specific moment for a specific man, and that our party and that our fellow conservatives and like-minded independents and Democrats will join with us to get the nation back. And that is what we need. And we have a president right now who has invited all of this misbehavior around the world because he is so weak and so feeble and so disorganized and everywhere. President Trump, he was a little more unpredictable, and he used a sharp tongue, but he kept these dictators around the world on their best behavior. And that's what a strong leader can do. And that doesn't make him a dictator. That doesn't make us extremists. That just means that we love our nation as we should, and we are willing to fight and do whatever is necessary to protect and defend her. So what I need from all of you at the tip of the spear, at the front line of this fight, with the first most dispositive voice in this upcoming caucus contest, go out there, recruit 10 captains that can recruit 10 other people to commit to show up in caucus. My only worry is low turnout. I don't want our folks, I don't want our fellow patriots thinking, well, a caucus is a little different than an election. I don't know how that really works. I don't know what I have to do. Do I have to give a speech? Remember, the other side right now, they're so nasty and they're so vile and they're so off-putting and odious with everything that they're trying to do to cancel us online, to hunt us in real life. And so in these days leading up to the caucus, you are our brand ambassadors. You are carrying the Trump brand as you go out and recruit these captains and get these caucus goers. And so be inviting. While things are challenging and we have to turn them around, this is the team that's going to do it. And I am so very proud to have all of you on my team. Thank you for letting me fight for you in Washington. Thank you for all you do for the Hawkeye State and for President Trump. Let's go caucus. Let's go win. Let's get to that 75% and let's go get them. Thank you all so much.
Governor Ron DeSantis also brought along a surrogate to the Hawkeye State last weekend. He was in Johnston, Iowa, along with Kentucky Congressman Thomas Massie, who told the crowd why he was supporting the governor's presidential bid. Let's listen.
I think this is the first presidential candidate who has ever come out in favor of legislation that would limit his power as a president. I mean, that is remarkable. But, you know, on the way over here, he was telling me about stuff he did in Florida, and I said, did you do that by executive order, or did you have to pass that through the legislature? And the answer was always, I got it passed through the legislature. And that's the hard work. That's the hard way of doing it. But it sticks. Everything that you've done that you put through the legislature will be in place after you're gone. And that's what we need. He mentioned the REINS Act. That actually, we debated that and had a hearing on that in my subcommittee, in the Judiciary Subcommittee. Jim Jordan wanted me to chair the subcommittee on antitrust. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of complicated law. And isn't that the government going in and punishing, winners and losers, or picking the winners and losers? He says, I'll rename it to the subcommittee on administrative law, regulatory reform, and antitrust. And I said, administrative law? That's like 95% of the government? You're going to give me jurisdiction over that? So I took it. And he's like, yeah, Massie, you can have hearings on raw milk or whatever you want. So I've been doing that. I've had a hearing on the fact that 4 meat processors control 85% of the U.S. market. And I've got a bill to fix that, to empower, not by going in and busting them up and having the government sit there with guards and say, are you colluding, but by giving small processors and farmers and consumers the power to get the USDA the hell out of their lives.
Another thing we'll do that is kind of like, because the administrative state has been unaccountable, you have like the Department of Education has like SWAT teams and stuff. We are going to eliminate that nonsense. I mean, they should not be militarized. They're politically weaponized, and then they're militarized. Like, that is totally unacceptable. So you're going to see these IRS agents, Department of Education, like that is just a non-starter with me. They should not be wielding that power.
Governor, I wanted to tell you, as soon as I heard Congressman Massey was endorsing you, that guaranteed my vote for you. And so I just want you to know that. To all the Ron Paul and Rand Paul caucus goers, and also there's a lot of liberty lovers in New Hampshire too, what's your message to those voters that if you just wanted them to know one thing about you before they voted?
Well, I'll let Thomas answer that, but I think what he would say is that, we're talking about Second Amendment rights, very important. We talk about other things, but when was the time where our rights were most in jeopardy? It was during COVID. And who was willing to stand up? Very few. I was one of the ones that was willing to stand up, take the heat, take the attacks, to make sure that my people were able to work, go to school, and to be able to make their own decisions. We banned vaccine passports in the state of Florida. We banned COVID vaccine mandates on employment. And we made sure that that wasn't being weaponized against people. So I think in terms of liberty, that was the number one threat to liberty that we have faced, and certainly in my lifetime. And very few were able to stand up. And not only did we stand up, We beat Fauci on all these things. We made Florida the free state in this country.
So my gateway into understanding the Constitution was actually the Second Amendment. And by the way, if you all didn't have constitutional carry, I wouldn't have come here today. But so thank you for getting that passed, okay, you guys in the legislature. But my gateway was the Second Amendment, and it was always my litmus test was you ask a politician about the Second Amendment, and if they start out their sentence with duck hunting, meh, I am not voting for you. I like duck hunting. That's great, but that is not what the Second Amendment is about. And if you don't understand the Second Amendment, chances are you don't understand any of the rest of that document. Okay? That's still, and Ron gets it. But my litmus test is now different. After COVID, the day before they started 15 days to slow the spread, I could see this coming down. And I tweeted, I said, I fear that the infringements of our liberties in the next year are going to be greater than FDR's internment of Japanese Americans in camps. Now, I did that to kind of upset the Democrats and remind them that, like, the tyranny came from their president, right? So they got mad at that, but unfortunately what I said was true. Like, all of our, and there still are Republicans. They're still presidential candidates who don't get this. They do not. There's one presidential candidate who was responsible for perpetuating some of this tyranny, okay? And I was taking the brunt of that. And then there's some candidates, we don't know where they were when COVID happened, right? I think they were trying to sell drugs and, and more data to the government on people. Okay. And then there are just people who went along to get along, okay? All of those people constitutionally are disqualified for service. And the governor put his finger on it. The greatest threat to liberty that's happened in my adult lifetime was during COVID, and this is the only guy who was fighting when it could have cost him his position in government.
Congressman Massie spoke to a McClatchy News reporter following the event. He said it was possible that Governor DeSantis would outperform expectations, but likely wouldn't beat frontrunner former President Donald Trump in next month's Iowa caucus. Next, an interview with Stephen Gruber Miller of the Des Moines Register in Iowa. He told us about the state of the GOP presidential race there, with just 3 weeks left until the first-in-the-nation caucus.
The Des Moines Register and NBC News have done some polling on Iowa on the Republican presidential race, and what we found is Donald Trump has increased his support from earlier in the year. He now has a majority support among Iowa caucus goers at 51%. Ron DeSantis comes second at 19%. Nikki Haley comes third, close behind at 16%. Those are really the only candidates above 5% here. So those are the three who have some significant support in operations in Iowa going into caucus day.
So we had covered a couple of events with Trump and DeSantis surrogates out in Iowa from the past weekend. What's the role of those surrogates, and do Iowans care?
Yeah, campaigns always want to point to supporters as proof that they're plugged into certain communities or that they're plugged into the state and the values that matter. So DeSantis has dozens of legislative endorsements, and he has his biggest endorsement, Governor Kim Reynolds. And she's been out, she's cut ads for him, she's been out on the trail campaigning for him. Interestingly, we polled on this too, and our polling shows actually 31% of likely Republican caucus goers say it makes them more likely to support DeSantis. 14% say it makes them less likely to support him. But 54%, a majority, say it doesn't matter to them at all. So I think, Iowans, there's always trusted messengers that people like to turn to, but Iowans also like to make up their own minds. So they're going to go into caucus night, kind of considering all of those supporters, but ultimately making a decision themselves. And as far as Reynolds goes, Trump has sort of tried to cut into this advantage as well. His campaign is also running ads with clips of the governor praising him during past rallies before the current presidential race was underway, making it seem like she's endorsed him when in fact she's endorsed DeSantis.
You've been out on the trail with candidate Nikki Haley in recent days. What was that like? What was that experience like? And what's her ground game like in Iowa with 3 weeks to go?
Yeah, Nikki Haley has sort of lagged behind DeSantis and Trump as far as ground game. DeSantis and the Never Back Down PAC have had dozens of people on the ground in Iowa, and Trump has a really sophisticated ground game this year, which wasn't the case when he first ran in 2016. So Haley has kind of been playing catch up a little bit to that. She sort of saved some of her money from earlier in the race and is deploying it now. She's also got an endorsement from Americans for Prosperity Action, national conservative grassroots network, and they have about 10 staffers and dozens of full-time door knockers who are out encouraging people to go caucus for her. So she's hopeful that that endorsement will help her close that gap. As far as her events, she holds town hall events. She always takes questions from the crowd. She's a very polished speaker and is very good at answering those audience questions. She had a pretty big event. She had around 300 people at an event last night in Davenport, which was probably her bigger one on this swing. And she's been a little bit slower to visit Iowa. She hasn't done, the 99 county tour like DeSantis has, but she's sort of ramping up her travel in the last month. And I think we're going to see a lot of her between now and caucuses. This last swing she just completed was 5 days, 10 campaign events over that time.
So with 3 weeks left to go until the caucuses, what is it going to be like on the ground for voters and candidates in Iowa?
Well, if you're in Iowa, you've already seen the ads, either online or on your TV screens. There's a lot of candidate ads attacking each other. Particularly DeSantis and Haley's PACs have been going after each other as they try to position themselves as the main challenger to Donald Trump. So they're not going after Trump as much on the air, but they are going after each other. Trump, like I mentioned earlier, is running ads with Governor Reynolds praising him in the past. All the candidates are running ads, promoting themselves. So that's one aspect of things. You also might get, someone knocking on your door. You might get text messages telling you, hey, come out to a candidate event or come caucus. Make sure you're ready to caucus on January 15th. So there will be a lot of last minute action by these campaigns to try to get people out to events and, most importantly, get them out on a cold January 15th night to caucus.
And what are you and your Des Moines Register colleagues looking at over the next 3 weeks? What are kind of little signs of what may happen?
Yeah, the caucuses traditionally break late. And what we see, we always look for if there's a late surge of support for anybody, right? The race could look a certain way now, and some candidate could gain a little bit of momentum. I think it's going to be a matter of degrees as far as the results in Iowa, right? Trump has that big lead, and historically we've never seen anyone with that large of a lead get leapfrogged in the caucuses, but a strong second place could be good for either Haley or DeSantis going into New Hampshire. And so they'll be looking to, whatever the margin is, they'll be looking to frame it as a win for them. And so the degrees matter, right? Turnout and organization matter because, again, you have to get your people out, your supporters out on a very specific night at a specific time to go caucus for you. It's a little bit different than a primary. So the organization and ability to get people motivated to turn out really matters.
Next, a look at how Republican activists in Iowa are preparing for the Hawkeye State's first-in-the-nation caucuses. A peek into a meeting of the Boone County GOP, where locals were welcome to ask questions about how the caucus process works and what they can expect next month.
So what is a caucus? They wanted to have something on what is a caucus, and that was before I knew C-SPAN was going to come and tape this. But so what is a caucus? People want to know what's the difference between a caucus and a primary. So when you want to know something, what do? You look in the dictionary. A primary is run by the state, just like any other election. You go vote where you normally vote. A caucus, and I'm reading what the dictionary said, a caucus is a closed meeting of a group of persons belonging to the same political party or faction, usually to select candidates or to decide on policy. So in Iowa, this means the political parties themselves run the caucus. It's not run by the state or the county or anybody.
A little bit more. Okay.
One more thing to read. This is for all of our friends not in Iowa that may be listening to this. Briefly, this is what we would like the rest of the country to know about the Republican Iowa caucus. You have to be a registered Republican living in your precinct to vote in person at the designated site. It's a one evening only event with no absentee voting. We use paper ballots counted by hand. No one out of state can vote, although you can certainly attend as a visitor, such as the media. So that's it.
Eileen, can I touch on a couple of things?
Sure.
Okay. In regards to after I get done and I turn it over to the caucus, I think we should run through a little bit of what happens in the actual precincts.
Okay.
How that goes, if that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
And so basically once the caucus, once everything is adjourned to the individual precincts, there's a chairperson and a secretary. And the first order of business that they will do is to have the vote.
To vote themselves as
permanent chair and permanent secretary. That way the chair, they have someone who's going to conduct the meeting, and the secretary is just as important, if not more important, because they're the ones that record all the information down as far as addresses, names, as who does whatever. Yes?
You said permanent chair and permanent secretary? I thought it was temporary.
Well, you're temporary until you're voted in as permanent.
Okay.
Yes, that happens right away as soon as you're there. You have to have somebody running it, so that's why you call it a temporary chair and a temporary secretary, and 9 times out of 10 they will become the permanent secretary and the permanent chairman. But you have to have a temporary one to get the process started, and then legally you vote them in as your permanent. Okay, does that make sense? Looks like a formality, but that's the way you have to do it.
And they're already chosen.
Yes.
All of those temporary chairs and temporary secretaries are already chosen, and they know that they're going to be going to their precinct and they're going to nominate themselves. I nominate myself as, or somebody can do it, from the group. And most generally, nobody challenges that because nobody wants to be a chairman.
Or the secretary.
Or the secretary. So.
I think the next thing that we need to discuss, because I heard a question asked, well, what else goes on in front of everybody? Well, probably the next, after the permanent one was elected, then go ahead and tell them.
Well, actually, the next thing is we have what's called a Lincoln bag, and we pass it around for donations that come to our Boone County funds. And after that, we will collect the presidential ballots, and those people that are counters, like Cam is going to be a counter. We're going to, haven't found them all yet, but we're going to designate counters too. So they will collect the ballots, and we're going to send them off to a classroom at DMAC to do the counting. Not every caucus does this, but we're going to, because we have 7 precincts in our room. So, and when they go off to do the counting, that allows the temporary, the now permanent chair and secretary just to start doing the business, because we're going to nominate people for the Boone County Committee, which Cam has been wondering about. How do I do that if I have to count ballots? Well, we can make sure his name is on the list. So that's one election. And then another election is people that want to come to the county convention in February. Yeah, in February. And there's the platform of Iowa to look at if we want to add planks to that. So that's another thing. And then at some point in time, they will come back into the counters will come back and tell us what the vote was.
If I could add one more thing, and
Sure.
I'm not trying to interrupt you, but I think it's important because I know this will be a question. Well, how come you're taking the ballots away from the room and going somewhere else? How do we know that they're being counted properly? The campaigns have already said that they want people, and it's in the state bylaws that they're allowed and they should come and watch the counting of the ballots. So every, just like Boone 1 will have 2 counters, and they will probably have 2 or 3 people standing behind them, watching to make sure that they're counting them properly. So and this is something that we talked about because we felt historically people at the caucus, one of the most important things they probably want to do is vote for this presidential straw poll or election, whichever one you want to call it. And they don't want to sit there for long hours and hours after hours. So we want to move it along swiftly, not hurry it, but move it swiftly so that the business can be taken care of while the ballots are being counted, and then they'll bring the results of the ballots in, and by then a lot of the business will be done at the precincts.
And on a state election or a government election, they have something called chain of custody. So Cam is going to have a paper that has, where he tallies up the votes, and he's going to sign that paper that says I was a counter, and then it's up to him and his fellow counter to do it accurately, count it twice, and then bring it to the person that's going to call it in to the state. So it's.
And who's that? Who calls it into the state?
I do. I'm going to do that.
So the leader of every, you're the leader of the Boone one?
Right.
And Rick is going to be leading the Ogden?
Right, and Tammy. So we would be the designated. And it's you can either call it in and they say, please don't do that. Use an app because we can't answer that many phones. So it'll be an app on a phone that we, and I'll have 7 precincts to report. So, and I have somebody to help me.
Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was also out on the campaign trail this past week. In Phoenix, he urged supporters to help him garner 43,000 signatures to appear on Arizona's ballot and talked about why he appealed to younger voters. Let's listen.
We're launching tonight our ballot petition drive in this state. We need 43,000 signatures, and we have until August to get them, but I'm expecting that we're going to do it a lot quicker than that. Prior to launching the ballot initiative, ballot petition drive in this state, we need to name all of our electors. And so we have a number, and those are the electors who a couple days after the election will go to the Capitol and cast their vote for me. And we got all those electors very, very quickly. They have to be people who are very trusted, who won't take a bribe, and who share the values of this campaign. And I want to thank all of our electors are here tonight, and I want to thank them. And a couple of minutes ago, I read for the first time the new Quinnipiac poll that just came out, and it has me leading both President Biden and President Trump among young people, under people among people under 35, among Americans under 35 years of age. Last month it showed the same thing, the Quinnipiac poll, but I was at 38 in that age group. Today I'm at 40. So the momentum is building. The Harvard-Harris poll that came out recently showed me it actually looks at a different age group, which is under 45. And I'm winning in that age group as well. I'm also winning among independents, and I'm doing very, very well. We're in a 3-way tie with Hispanic voters, with me beating President Trump, and among many, many other cohorts. So I feel very, very good about where we are today, and I'm really happy to be here in Arizona. To me, it's clear why we're doing well among young people. There's a couple of reasons. One is the one group that I don't do well with are the people that I ought to. They're people who know about my family, which are baby boomers. But the problem with the baby boomers, I think, is that they get their news from MSNBC, Fox, and CNN. And whereas the young people are getting their news from podcasts and long-form interviews, and they become less subsumed in all the orthodoxies, the things that we're supposed to believe and the things that we're supposed to know. But the other reason is there's no other candidate who's talking about what's happening with young people. And one of the polls that I read was probably the most dismaying data point that I've seen since I started this campaign. It was a poll in 2013 that asked young people, young Americans under 35 years of age, if they were proud of the United States of America. And at that point, 85% of them said yes. The same poll taken last month, 18% said yes. So somehow during the terms of the last two presidents of the United States, all of the young people in our country have lost their faith in the United States of America, their pride in our country, and they've lost at the same time their hope for their own future. And I have 6 kids at home, and I have 7 kids altogether. One of them is 39 and he's in a house. But the other 6 are between 20 and 30, and they all got good jobs. They went to the best colleges. They got good paying jobs, but they don't make enough to buy a home. And they're in better shape than most of their generation. But none of their friends is thinking of buying a home either. And for my generation, it was the essential promise of the American dream that if you worked hard, if you played by the rules, you could finance a home, you could raise a family, you could take a summer vacation, you could put something aside for your retirement on one job. There's nobody in this generation that thinks that promise applies to them. This is the first generation in American history, at 20 to 30-year-olds, who believe that their lives are going to be worse off than their parents' lives. The American dream for them has become a nightmare.
The Arizona Republic reported many of those who attended the Phoenix rally were looking for an alternative in a presumed rematch between President Biden and former President Trump. Next, part of an ad the Kennedy campaign released this week.
This fig tree that I'm sitting in, probably 200 years old, and it began as a little tiny seed with almost no chance of growing. And yet it's grown into this mighty structure that dominates the waterway. When I started this campaign last April, almost 7 months ago, a lot of people treated it with ridicule and derision. They said it was a long shot, that it would never work. And yet the campaign has grown, and we're now leading President Trump and President Biden in all Americans under 45 years of age. We're leading in independent voters and in many, many other categories. And we have a real shot at taking back our country. I've spent my career fighting so that Americans can enjoy these kind of natural resources. Nature is the infrastructure of our communities. And if we want to meet our obligation to our children, to give them the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands.
And now, a look back at ads from independent presidential candidates in 1996. Businessmen Ross Perot and Maury Taylor both sought to also solidify support from voters disenchanted with Democrats and Republicans. Next, a few ads from their campaigns.
It wasn't long ago that Harley-Davidson was about to fail because of free trade with the Japanese. Finally, the fair traders leveled the playing field, and Harley was able to keep the tens of thousands of American jobs. But our jobs are in trouble again. Because of people in Washington like Bob Dole and Bill Clinton, they've never made anything. I'm a manufacturer, not a politician or a lawyer. Call me. I have the business sense we need to keep fair trade for Americans.
As president, Ross Perot will explain changes to major programs like Medicare and Social Security to the people. He will conduct national voter referendums so the people can approve or reject. It's your tax dollars, your programs. You should decide. Vote for Perot.
There are 27.5 million veterans in the United States. And there's one more battle to fight. We have to take our country back from the special interests.
Don't waste your vote in 96. Just vote for Ross.
Because you own this country.
Next, a little more from President Biden's trip to Milwaukee. The Journal-Sentinel newspaper there reported his visit to the state's Black Chamber of Commerce was intended to highlight his administration's support for Black-owned businesses. Black voters in the Milwaukee area are considered crucial for President Biden in his re-election bid. In 2020, he won the state by just more than 20,000 votes.
All this groundbreaking work is producing groundbreaking results. Record job creation, historic economic growth. We have among the lowest inflation rates of any major economy on this earth. We're fighting a lower cost to give folks just a little bit more breathing room, as my dad used to say. But let's be clear. Republicans are against so many critical actions that help working and middle-class people, especially Black Americans. Just remember how the pandemic hit Black businesses especially hard. How my predecessor on his watch, women and minority-owned small businesses found themselves last in line to access emergency relief through programs like the Paycheck Protection Program. On my watch, energy and emergency relief went to minority-owned businesses first, not last. We also, when I came to office, we cut Black child poverty in half because of the child tax credit. As I tried to extend it, every single Republican in Congress voted against continuing the program. But I'm not giving up till we get it back. And by the way, all the data shows it saves the economy money. The spending on child poverty saves money in health care, education, a whole range of things. This is not down the drain. It generates growth. We drafted and I signed a law that will lower prescription drug costs significantly for all Americans. You know, I was at a town meeting in Northern Virginia, and I was holding a meeting. This is 2 years ago. I've been fighting Big Pharma for a long time. You know, if you go to wherever your provider of any drug you have to take, any prescription drug, and you decide you're going to buy it here in Milwaukee, or you're going to go buy it in Toronto, Canada, or Paris, France, or Budapest, guess what? You're going to pay 2 to 3 times as much for the prescription. Same company, same American manufacturer, same thing. Because Medicare pays for it in most cases. And guess what? We're not just if you're at the VA and you get the prescription drug, they negotiate the price with the pharmaceutical company. Well, they passed laws earlier, way on. I've been fighting it for over 35 years to say you can't negotiate. Medicare can't negotiate for drug prices for. And by the way, that's how they make enormous amounts of money. And by the way, every one of my Republican colleagues voted against this one. And now they're trying to cut Medicare, trying to cut Medicaid, and Social Security. Your own Senator Johnson calls Social Security a, quote, Ponzi scheme. Are you kidding me? You know, from the time you get your first paycheck, you pay into Social Security your whole life. These are the same Republicans who enacted tax cuts to overwhelmingly benefit the wealthy to the tune of $2 trillion additional deficit. There also something else is happening. There's some in this country who are waging a full-on attack of Black economic opportunity. They're denying economic opportunity when it comes to higher education, starting a business, keeping businesses open. That's how you generate economic opportunity. You educate people. And folks, by the way, I went to the Supreme Court to eliminate student debt that was out there. And guess what? The Supreme Court ruled against, but I still got 136 million people's debt relieved. Because guess what? The interest they're paying on that debt is something that prevents them from buying a home, starting a business, all those things. Now, that's on top of erasing black history and banning books, erasing black history and banning books. Did you ever think you'd live in a country, now all kidding aside, growing up, where we're banning books, book banning in grade schools and high schools? I think it's unconscionable. These attacks hurt all Americans because investing in black economic prosperity lifts everybody up. You know, we always believe diversity is our strength as a nation. I don't believe, as the former president said again yesterday, that immigrants are polluting our blood. The economy and our nation are stronger when we're tapping into the full range of talents in this nation. My administration is going to continue to fight these attacks because everyone deserves a fair shot, just a shot. Let me close with this. You know, for all we've done, the real heroes of this story are you, the American people, not a joke. Not a joke. Hard-working people like Rashawn of Hero Plumbing here in Milwaukee, and the thousands of towns all across America, these thousands of stories of revival and renewal, hope and optimism because people aren't giving up. Pride in your work and your family and your town. Pride in this nation. That's what I see no matter where I go in this country. That's why I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I've never been more optimistic about America's prospects, America's future than I am today. You just have to remember who we are. We are the United States of America. And there's nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. If we work together. And by the way, as I said, we're the only country in the world that out of every crisis, we've come out stronger than we went in. Remember who we are. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Paul Steinhauser is Fox News national political reporter and columnist with the Concord Monitor in New Hampshire. Paul Steinhauser, what's the current race, the current state of the GOP presidential race in New Hampshire right now?
Well, our governor up here in New Hampshire, Chris Sununu, who endorsed Nikki Haley in mid-December, is crowing that it is now a two-person race in New Hampshire between her and former President Donald Trump, who obviously remains the commanding frontrunner both nationally and in the early state polls. But got a couple of surveys that have come out in recent days that were conducted during and after Sununu's endorsement that really do show it is becoming a two-person race here. Trump's lead in the mid-40s, Haley now surging to about 29 or 30% among likely Republican presidential primary voters in New Hampshire.
And what is Nikki Haley's ground game like in New Hampshire? What's her campaign doing?
Well, her ground game was pretty small for quite some time. Remember, Haley for months had been running a very nimble, very lean machine, a very small campaign with not a big imprint either here in New Hampshire or in Iowa, whose caucuses lead off the calendar. They go on January 15th, our primary on the 23rd. But in recent weeks, she's been building up her staff in New Hampshire. She also landed the endorsement, the backing back in November or early December, I believe, from Americans for Prosperity, from their political wing. And with that comes a lot of support when it comes to the ground game, when it comes to getting out the vote and reaching out to the grassroots. So she's definitely been boosted in recent weeks, and now she has Governor Sununu's endorsement as well. And that doesn't come with a huge organization, but it does come with probably, arguably, the most energetic governor in the country, somebody who's going to be tireless for her on the campaign trail and as a top surrogate doing media interviews.
Now, you wrote earlier this week as well about kind of an ad battle going on between super PACs supporting Haley and Trump. What are those ads looking like, and how big are the buys?
Yeah, the Trump super PAC, MAGA Incorporated, Make America Great Again Incorporated, had been off the air for a while in New Hampshire, but now they're up with new ads. And instead of taking aim at Ron DeSantis, who was their big target back in the summer and early fall, they're now going after Nikki Haley.
Nikki Haley promised,
I will not now, not ever, support raising the gas tax.
Really? Not now? Not ever? Just 24 months later, high tax Haley flipped.
Let's increase the gas tax by 10 cents.
That's right. High tax Haley broke her promise.
Let's increase the gas tax.
Repeatedly backing higher taxes hurts families. New Hampshire can't afford Nikki High Tax Haley. Make America Great Again Inc. is responsible for the content of this.
The super PAC supporting her, Stand for America Fund, is firing back and kind of noting that, well, if everybody's attacking Nikki Haley, there must be a reason why.
Of all the Republicans running for president, why is Donald Trump only attacking Nikki Haley? Because Trump knows Haley's the only one who can beat him. As governor, Nikki Haley cut taxes for small businesses by 40%. And now she's pledging to eliminate the federal gas tax. Want an 80-year-old name from the past or a new generation of conservative leadership? SFA Fund Inc. is responsible for the content.
New Hampshire's been flooded with ads. We're going to see a lot more between now and January 23rd, and it's a very similar story in Iowa as well.
So we're a month out from New Hampshire's primary. What is the next 4 weeks going to look like on the ground in the Granite State?
You know, it's funny. It's going to actually be a little quiet here. Why? Well, Iowa comes first. So most of the campaign traffic over the holidays and those first 2 weeks of January leading up to the 15th, you're going to see former President Trump. You're going to see especially Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley to a degree spending most of their time in Iowa. The one exception to that rule, Vivek Ramaswamy as well. Remember him, the multimillionaire biotech entrepreneur, first-time candidate who's also in the hunt for the nomination. The one oddball there will be former Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, making his second bid for the White House. And just as he did in the 2016 cycle, he's devoting nearly all his time and resources to New Hampshire. So he'll have the state pretty much to himself over a couple of weeks. But once those caucuses are over on the 15th, everybody who's remaining in the race comes right back to New Hampshire.
A reminder, this program and all of C-SPAN's campaign 2024 coverage can be found online at cspan.org/campaign.